Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone who has joined us today. I'm really excited to spend this next hour with you, stepping a little bit outside of my day-to-day advancement role and widening the aperture, as I like to say, on life and career, and thinking a bit about those of us who find ourselves in the so-called sandwich generation. And I want to start out just by really acknowledging the reason that this work is so important. It actually plays directly into our commitment as a university to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because when we think about who's included and heard from, even on something simple like your Buckeye Wellness webinar series or the podcasts, the people who are heard from actually define what is the status quo. And so I think it's super important that people who have life situations that set them apart, maybe not in other ways we think about inclusion, but certainly in life situations that set them into a certain consideration set, that they be included and their point of view be included as well. And that's really why this has been such an important part of my work for a while. Nearly a quarter of us are caring for children under 18 and an aging parent or parents, which puts us in what they, commonly refer to as the sandwich generation. If you just think that of those of us in our 40s, and I'll self-select into that bravely, that's about half of us. So if you look around at your colleagues who are in this life phase, you might realize it's actually quite a few of us who feel this. And I love this LinkedIn post I found a while back about, is it really a sandwich or is it more of a panini because it's pretty squished and pressed and it's a little too crispy and stuff is oozing out and it's awfully hot in this sandwich that we find ourselves in. And I just use that because it's more descriptive of how a lot of people encounter this time of their lives. And why is that why is it affecting so many people so profoundly? I think a couple of things are true, and what I wanted to do is just walk through them in terms of really an acknowledgement. You may find as I walk through some of these things that you're like, oh yeah, that does actually reflect and make sense for what I have been going through. The fact of the matter is that the concept of parenthood, as well as the concept of a true childhood phase of life, is pretty modern. This is something that has come about as the world has evolved past agrarian cultures. And when I think about it, and when I wrote about it at a very high level for my book, what I looked back toward was really the fact of parenting, whether or not you had children, was really pretty much a yes or a no in the pre-Victorian era. It was a matter of survival. Big families were really important in those cultures and times, but parenthood wasn't something that was like an extra job for you. It wasn't something that you were necessarily trying to be good at until the Victorian era brought in a general cultural and sociological idealization of the concept of motherhood and child. And you see a lot of artistic depiction during that time of this sort of idealized Madonna and child approach. And then post World War II, as with so many other things in our Western culture, really changed because we took on a tendency as a society here to think of the mother as the primary parent. Where we stand today in many Western cultures is what is efficiently, or I guess I was going to say affectionately called intensive parenting. I don't know how affectionate it is for a lot of us. In many cases, if you are currently raising children, you are doing so as part of what I have referred to in some of those research pieces Nicole mentioned as Generation P or Generation Pivot, meaning regardless of exactly what year you were born, you may be trying to raise children in a way that is a pivot or a change from the way you were raised and very consciously doing so. So many of us can remember spending quite a bit of our childhood outside. Today, almost half of children under the age of 8 are holding a tablet device of their own in their hands at any given time. So huge change sociologically and culturally there. As well as trends in parenting have changed. I can't see everyone, but I often in live versions of this say, how many of you heard in your upbringing, say that again and I'll wash your mouth out with soap? Well, the equivalent today is educating our children on things like vocabulary choice and using their words to express their emotions. Things like, you want to go out, take your bike, be home before dark. I mean, some of us can actually tell our children we didn't have to come home till the street lights came on, right? But now it's something where parents are able to track the child around the corner with a phone. They're able to keep in touch with a text. They're able to go pick them up. Another one that is often kind of cheekily referred to as, you better stop crying or I'll give you something to really cry about. Again, if you've heard that in your upbringing and you find yourself wanting to say that as a parent, and then you think, oh, I really, that's not how we say it now. We say, I can see that you're upset. Take a deep breath. Use your words, right? We're trying to educate our children to have emotional coping skills that many of us did not grow up developing in our family of origin because, again, we were told, you better stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And I say some of those as a little bit, a little bit of a storytelling aspect here, but also because this does represent a really important shift. If you, as the parent, are trying to move over onto the right side of these example screens here, what does that require of you? Well, it requires that you be able to pause, take a deep breath, use your words, behave appropriately, model for your children that you've actually, regulated for a moment before you've engaged with them. And what does that require? Well, it requires that you have enough support around you. It's much easier to take a deep breath and use your words and calm yourself down and regulate and model when you have enough resources and you've had enough sleep and you have access to the things that you need. Many of those things have not accompanied this increasing expectation of parents and parenting. So we've developed this whole idea of being a good parent and intensively parenting and parenting a new way or a right way or a more gentle way. But we haven't necessarily surrounded parents with the type of resources it takes to really adequately be able to perform like that. And that can set up a lot of difficult feelings and difficult situations. And I'm keeping an eye over here on the chat. And yes, there is an assumption with some of this that psychologically, emotionally, you have reparented yourself in some capacity to make sure that you kind of reached back toward some of the experiences you had and you've created a set of new behaviors and goals for yourself. And why don't you fit that in around the time that you're also working and maybe checking on your parents or having a sick pet or your house is flooded or something like that, right? So none of this is happening in a vacuum. The other thing that's very interesting as we look across the landscape of children, people say all the time, have children changed? Well, here's the thing. Children haven't necessarily changed. What we know about children, what we are able to communicate about children, that has changed drastically. And one of the things that we see now is a more widely accepted overview of how children learn and how they focus. And what we see is that many, many children fall into a camp of neurodiversity, such as they're gifted, or they have ADD, or they have dyslexia, often which overlap with something like anxiety or depression or OCD, because children are trying to cope with whatever that learning or cognitive difference is. And so you feel at times you may hear the term twice exceptional. You've got a kiddo who maybe is dealing with two or three of these things. And families are busier than ever. I don't know if you can relate to the fridge full of like calendars and to-do lists and chore charts, or maybe they're all digital now in your house. But the fact of the matter is, there is a lot going on. And we were just on an earlier call, my team and I, we were talking about one woman was really, she was half day today. She was doing laundry and packing. Her family's headed off to a soccer tournament out of town with two children under the age of 12. And they're going to miss half a day of school. And they were talking about whether this should be an excused absence from school. I mean, just think about that for a second in terms of the way that you were parented. Did you actually ever think that you would leave school early on a Friday to go out of town and play soccer? Well, here's the reality. Youth sports are a 15 plus billion-dollar business a year in our country. That doesn't necessarily mean that your family has to participate, but it does indicate that there's a huge societal push toward things like these for families. The other thing is, as hard as 2020 might have been, 2021, 2022 for your family with whatever type of learning situation you found yourself in, it did not really result in a very different type of school environment after the lockdown or after the pandemic. So we did not land on year-round education options for kids. We did not land on a standardized schedule and an assumption of extracurricular busing for kids who have activities. We did not land on free wraparound care unless maybe your community pivoted and did something like this, but that's definitely the minority of communities around most parents who are trying to still fit all these things in, accommodate for extracurriculars, accommodate for the school day being shorter than the work day. I'm going to take a breath because I see some folks are losing audio, and I want to just make sure. Has everyone lost the audio?
I can still hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going. I hope we can help Kim troubleshoot. I also appreciated the comment that our expectations of kids have changed too. That is such a good point. We really do expect them to be uh, really good at a lot of things. Here's the other thing that has happened. You can see my picture here is a nice, tidy little neighborhood. This goes back to the way subdivisions were created after World War II, but a lot of families now live far away from their support systems, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, their sort of extended families. So you're hearing a trend. We're raising the expectations. We're actually losing levels of support. Now, Ohio State itself has waded right into this conversation out of the very office, which is bringing us together today with a study that they put out about the power of positive parenting. And what sits inside this study is a really important nugget about pressure and impact and burnout, and how that has not necessarily been alleviated by supposedly everything we have learned in the last couple of years, right? And when I spent time with the Kids Mental Health Foundation, which was actually started at Nationwide Children's as the On Our Sleeves program, the studies that we conducted with working parents showed us very clearly that parents were worried about their kids' health, mental health, emotional health, and development, and that those worries were going up. And also that it was distracting parents and draining them and making them really worry about what this would be doing long term to their kids, and that this kind of stuff was weighing on them at work. So the second round of our study, which was conducted in 2022, literally pointed to this idea that people are making work decisions based on what is happening with children, not just because of they need so many hours in the day, but potentially they need so many interventions. They need so much advocacy. They need so much additional help with getting to appointments and um, getting medication stabilized or getting learning differences accommodated. And that's a lot of work. And so some parents told us in that study, we have actually, gone part-time or found a different employer or stayed home because we just cannot do both. You might have seen the Surgeon General's advisory, Parents Under Pressure. This came out earlier this year. It was one of those reports. It's huge. It lands on the desk with a thump, and it says very clearly parents are struggling. They don't have the supports that they need at home, at work, in community organizations, in educational organizations, and yet the expectations continue to rise. I think the thing that was hard for so many of us who've worked on this for a while when we saw this report was we were all saying, I mean, thank you for putting it in writing, Dr. Murthy, and thank you for calling attention. And now what, right? A lot of us are eager for the responses. And I want to acknowledge, Jessica, your comment. Grandparents have changed too. They are not sitting around in the rocker waiting for you to drop off the kids. They might be on a cruise. They might be working. And that's a whole familial change that we've experienced as well. I want to take just a breather here and say to you, what about parenting feels especially hard right now? If you feel open to putting something in the chat, would just love to hear. Are there things that have resonated in what I just said, or even other things that feel particularly heavy right now in terms of what's going on with parenting? And Ashima said, grandparents are retiring so much later. That's true. They might be working full time for years and years past when you thought they'd be helping us, right? So there are a lot of impacts that as our generations change and evolve, what happens to those of us with young children changes and evolves too. I don't see a lot. That's okay. If we are gonna, maybe we'll just keep moving here and talk a little bit about how. Now it's coming in. Now it's coming in. I'm gonna back up. Okay. Forever child. I'm in my 50s and raising a forever child, working full time, helping with a grandson, and worried about your elderly parents and your grandson who has autism. I hear that. I hear that a lot in the conversations that I have. I had a conversation with a mom yesterday in a similar situation. That's a hard thing to be taking on. And I hear what you're saying. And balancing expectations. Yes, employers, spouses, children, parents, siblings, and little time for self. We're going to actually land on that concept by the end of this today, because I think that's so, 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 so important. Thank you to everyone who has posted in there. We're getting a lot of agreement on that one, Sharon. People are definitely feeling that, and Heather too. So how has being a worker changed, and how does that factor in? Well, to be honest, we work more time than we ever did before. we are actually not getting to a point where we're working less, even though you would think we would be with all the technology that has evolved, right? And I'm going to pause because I do see a couple more things. I want to just really acknowledge these. This is a lot, and I'm so grateful that you're posting this stuff because this is really true. This is all really, really very true. Non-neurotypical child, single parent, completely exhausted, sometimes let things lax and not want to discipline. I hear that. I've been in that situation myself. And there is a really interesting juxtaposition between supporting a child and disciplining a child, right? Especially if they have something like you're saying with autism. Elderly dog, same. 12 years old over here, going on getting monthly pain shots, right? Activities, jobs, college apps, driver's license, husband and I working full time, combining with health issues, kids getting bullied, dealing with counselors. It never ends, and there's never a breather. And if there is, there's a problem with the house. I hear that and I acknowledge, and elderly parents and parents having Alzheimer's, or working full time and not having help from your siblings. So, one of the things that we over in our advancement team really hit, I think, a lot of us over the summer was that these stories are, I don't want to say common, but more common than maybe we realized. And so we've implemented a couple of things that might be helpful. I'll hit those as we finish up this section on being a worker. It's not cheap to put your child into childcare. This is a statistic from when my book came out in 2019, but this number's higher now. It's between $15,000 and $17,000 a year. So it's hard to find the resources to make that accessible. And 17% of US workers have access to paid family leave. I think that's one of the things I was referring to about the Surgeon General's report, right? You land a declaration like that on the federal level, and you hope that's going to lead to paid family leave being passed or something. And it just really has not standardized like that. The other thing, and those of you who have had natural children and maybe have chosen to breastfeed might be able to relate to this one, which is we actually find it very normal to send women, biological mothers, back to work before babies can eat solid food, which we don't even do with puppies. In fact, the rules about separating a litter of puppies from their mother before weaning are stronger than the policies around women being able to take time off work to accommodate a full schedule of recommended breastfeeding. So there are a lot of elements of that around the workplace that actually exacerbate this. The thing that I think is so important about this, and the reason that I have focused on the intersection between parenting and work, is that work can be stressful, but work can also be a main source of resources for people, because you personally are not going to go out and with your own hard cash buy access to an employee assistance program where you can be on the phone with a lawyer, you can be on the phone with a financial planner, you can get 10 free counseling sessions or 5 free counseling sessions to figure out if that's going to help you. You can rely on them to help you source elder care or child care or transportation needs, right? You're not going to buy into an EAP. But your employer probably does. Our employer does. Thankfully, at Ohio State, we have access to that. We have access to some care benefits, backup care benefits through Bright Horizons. We have access to the Caregiver Support Center, which is actually always publishing and coming up with resources for people who are caring for parents. So the reason I think this is so critical is that I do believe before COVID, there was a tendency of employers to think, well, it's not really my issue. What's going on over there with your family? I need you to show up here. I need you to do your job and deliver on these goals, and then we'll separate from each other at 5:30 p.m. and not worry about that. But that's actually not a fully representative picture of the opportunity that employers bring to help solve these things. And my question to all of you, and I'm going to slow down because this is it took a few minutes for those to come in, so I want to honor that this time, is do you know where to start to find the resources that Ohio State makes available? If you don't, please don't be shy, or even you can email or message me after, or our folks at the Office of the Chief Wellness Officer, because this is really important. It is so easy to hear about these things during open enrollment timeframe, and then what, right? All of a sudden it's May. You can't remember what you heard in open enrollment. You got to deal with this tomorrow, right? So I think that it is hard sometimes to recall. And what I love to do in these conversations is simply present to you in context of the problem The OSU HR website, the benefits website, is where you can find access to our employee assistance program. So that is going to open the door for, they'll help you research care. They can get you in touch with an attorney. They can get you in touch with a lawyer. They can, or, I'm sorry, I said that, a financial advisor. They can help you with counseling appointments. Those things are often the first line of defense that takes so much mental labor, right? Of calling around or figuring out how to schedule or getting it to a short list of options. So remember that that's available. Um, Somebody's mentioning they actually tried this after hearing from colleagues that it was helpful. And I think that's actually how I heard about it. And over in advancement, what I wanted to tell you is that we've implemented a couple things since acknowledging this about ourselves and each other over the summer, just how many people are struggling with big things. One is we repeat this information in team meetings once a quarter. We remind about the Bright Horizons benefit. We remind about how to get in touch with the EAP. We also have implemented something. The way we do it on our team might not work the way you do it on your team, but we came up with a standardization of a way to check in with each other. On our team, we do a 1 to 10, mental health 1 to 10. 1 is bad, 10 is perfect. And where are you? And we don't do this in every meeting. We don't do it every week. But there are times in our team where we say, let's just do that. Let's just do a mental health check-in with everybody. And very often the stuff that's putting people lower than a 5 is not about work. It's about some of the stuff that we're talking about here, which is a great opportunity for managers to take a look at capacity and resource balancing and make sure that if there's anything that can be done or should be done or needs to be done to cover something, to renegotiate something that's handled right there. It's also a great opportunity, like I said, to say to people, hey, I connected with the EAP. That really helped. And that's how I got from a 4 to an 8 or whatever that might look like. And the other thing it helps us with this 1 to 10 is that we can start to see a little bit of a pattern. Again, we don't do it every meeting, but if you do it 2 weeks apart and everybody goes lower, okay, that's important information, right? And we standardized it to do that because we didn't want everybody handling it themselves. How does each manager check in on their people? Well, some people might do it conversationally. Some people might not be comfortable asking about this at all because this wasn't what was in manager training for some of us, right? So I'm not saying it has to be 1 to 10. I'm saying it might be worth a team conversation about, do we want to have a different mechanism? Do you want to make it an agenda item on department meetings? Do you want to do something anonymous in email? I don't know. But I think it's important as workplace communities that we not forget that Ohio State, as our employer, connects us to each other and to resources. So we should definitely take advantage of that where and when we can. All right. The other thing that has definitely changed is what my parents call raising parents, and they say it with tongue in cheek. You've done a great job raising us, but it's actually turning into the truth as they age. And both of mine happen to be approaching 80. And here's the thing: 10,000 Americans will turn 65 today and tomorrow and every day until 2030. So if you feel this way, you are absolutely not alone. And many of those parents will now live longer than the lifespan used to be. And as we pointed out in our chat earlier, thank you for everyone who said they're also more active. They're also working longer. They're also not necessarily aging the way we thought about it. But here's a real kicker, and that is that the long-term care costs of taking care of this boom, the baby boom, aging so quickly and so rapidly and so much longer, is that those costs are outpacing inflation, and it will reach $500 billion a year uh, overall part of the economy. I believe that is a 2030 statistic of when it will hit that number. And I'm pulling this from data that was originally provided through the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. If you don't know anything about this program, I highly encourage you to take a peek at it. It's not necessarily a program that you can latch onto in your own community, but it is similar to what the Surgeon General's report did. It is actually out there ringing the bell about what is happening to caregivers. And the number one thing that they pointed out in their report is that the strain on caregivers adds to some of the things that we just talked about with being a parent and some of the things we just talked about with being a worker. So it's physical strain, emotional strain, financial strain, adding to this concept of stress. And I think that is what makes this so much more challenging than just taking one of these at a time. right? Because you've got stress coming at you. Now, when it comes to caring for aging parents, I wanted to just see if we could, if any of you out there are dealing with it and would take a moment and say, is there anyone you would is there anything you would tell someone who's just starting to deal with this? And I put spouse in here too, not necessarily aging, but maybe ailing. Last year I had a before I took this role, actually last year about this time, I had a convergence of caregiving crises. I had my mother, who is lives close and helps me with a lot of things, had emergency retina surgery because she had her retinas were like threatening to detach, so she couldn't drive for quite a while, and she was my backup driver. And my husband ripped the patella tendon in his knee and had to have surgery, and that's like a 14-week recovery, and he couldn't drive. And we have kids who are all the things we just talked about: busy, have athletic schedules, have things they need to be to, and I felt all of a sudden like I didn't even, I mean, I literally didn't even know where to start if my mom had needed somebody to come in and check on her after that eye surgery. I literally had no idea. Um, and so I wasn't working here at the time. I didn't have access to an EAP because I was doing my own business. And I am telling you, it was very overwhelming. And I wished I had been able to call somebody and say, like, what's the number one thing you would tell me? I want to thank Owen. You mentioned be very patient and flexible to their needs without getting frustrated, even though you are on the inside. That's powerful. That's powerful. That's impactful because I can tell you, I felt that. I felt like, you're busy. You kind of want them to hurry up. You kind of want them to snap back to what they used to be. You kind of want them to step in when they would have before, and now they can't. And it is very hard. And I think that is something that, as the child watching this, the impatience is real, and I appreciate that suggestion. Here we have one from Lori. Oh my gosh, Lori, 83-year-old mother, caregiving for your 57-year-old brother, and figuring out both. And you have a son with 3 kids who need help. Lori, I hope you can hang up from this call today and get on that EAP and try to see if they can bring you any resources, if you haven't already. Asking them what is the most important thing they want you to help them accomplish. Yes, because there can be some anger and resistance, right? There can be some real, I don't need this. I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know why you're stepping in on my finances or my driving or whatever they are kind of, uncomfortable giving up. I think that is something so profound about helping aging seniors with that's different than parenting. It has that parenting angle, and I even called my section, raising parents, but really it doesn't have the same reward headed your way as parenting does. You are not raising that parent toward a better, more independent next phase of life. And if you really sit with that for a minute, it doesn't surprise anyone why this is heavy, heavy caregiving work, even in a way that parenting is not, because of the nature of it. Driving all the care as I am in healthcare. Fair. I could see that expectation. My dad has had multiple strokes and currently in the hospital. I have young kids. Ashima, I'm sorry. And you have to learn to delegate to sisters and siblings because you cannot do all of it. You cannot do all of it. And I'm glad you shared that. I hope it helps even just a little bit to tell us, because that's a big load. That's a really big load. I do want to thank you all, because I think what we're heading toward is, okay, so what does all this mean? Right? We don't need we don't need to just talk about the problem and then hang up. That's part of the beauty of this series, is that hopefully we can share some ideas and tools with each other. So what I wanted to do here is maybe just literally take like 2 minutes and what I call a temperature check on all of us, which is, if you kind of had to say, I'm going to pick one of these that needs the biggest boost. I just think everyone would maybe take a minute, write it down, put it in your notebook, put it on a post-it note, um, and think about that for a little bit, because in some of the longer workshops that I've had the opportunity to lead with groups of parents, what we would do is we would identify the one where you need the boost, and then we would say, okay, what am I bringing to this area of my life, parenting, parent care, home care, that's basically from my family of origin, things that I maybe I'm assuming and don't realize I'm assuming, or things that I expected and didn't really think about that. So can I start from that? And then think about what's my vision here? What would I like this to be? Let's put that on the horizon as I would like this to have moments of respite, like Sharon is saying, for parent care. Or I would like this to have an opportunity to still parent, but reconnect to my spouse because I got to do that. Um, Thank you for the number for the Area Agency on Aging. That's really helpful. I appreciate that. Um, I think if you start from it's this one area, and I'm coming from this place in my family of origin, but here's what I want. Here's the vision I have for it. Then you can think about, okay, I probably am going to have to shift my mindset. You've seen it in the comments. I'm going to have to admit I can't do it all. I'm going to have to delegate. I'm going to have to revisit my own emotional approach to the way I'm handling these requests. I might have to say, I'm pushing back on the expectations that my kids do. I don't know, weekend soccer tournaments, or I am engaging in a different set of community resources than what might be expected because my parent needs this, my home needs this, my pet needs this, my spouse needs this, right? So it's kind of acknowledging if there's a mindset shift that needs to happen, you're not in your own way. And then, is there a different village or a additional village that you can reach out to? Resources. I appreciate so much the links and the phone numbers that you're all putting in the chat, because that's one way that you can jump in and pull, members of the village together. The other thing I would say here is that I have a dear friend and neighbor on this street who is being treated for cancer right now. And she asked if I could pick up her kids from the same school pickup where mine is being picked up at the same time, which is aftercare, and bring them to my house and do dinner for all the kids. And then she would come get them after she or her husband would come get them after whatever it was they needed to do. I got to tell you something. That was so easy. Because I was already doing it. I was already picking up. I was already making dinner. We live 7 houses apart. I don't think you should have to wait until you're in cancer treatment to start aligning yourself with people who are doing the same things that you're doing, struggling with the same things you're struggling with, or might be geographically right there. So if you look at this list right now and you say it's kids, it's work, it's parent care, it's home care, I think it's helpful to kind of think about who else might be in that time frame or in that struggle, and what are they doing, and could you guys spell each other off once a week for dinner? Could you do a ride for them and they do a ride for you? Could you offer, hey, you know what? I will even oversee homework on Tuesdays if you will oversee homework on Thursdays because I'm done with this algebra stuff. I mean, honestly, there's a bit of creativity, I think, that we can take ourselves if we don't wait until we're in um, some of these emergency situations. Now, this might be easier said than done in some families and in some neighborhoods and in some communities, but it is part of what I have often seen be helpful in a brainstorming type of setting, and really having people acknowledge that there are other folks who can potentially step in. Um, the reason this is so critical is everything that we have kind of talked about culminates in the idea that taking care of your people starts with taking care of yourself. Now, before you think that you're about to get another lecture on self-care, I want to differentiate this one. Um, the idea of self-care has gotten commercialized very, very, very heavily in our economy. So if you are about to receive a Christmas stocking from your family full of, bubble bath drops and tea bags, this is what I'm talking about. I am talking about radical self-care, and I am calling it radical because it may feel that way. It actually may feel that way because you may be saying, I'm not going to skip my workout, or I'm not going to sacrifice my lunch hour, or I am not going to attend every single rehearsal or practice, whatever that looks like for you. Because that's going to require you to do some boundary setting, negotiating. And I read a really great article. I can send the link out via you, Nicole, about most important time to practice self-care is when you least want to do it and it is absolutely least convenient for you, right? Because when you have, I don't know, an imaginary day off, and then you could take the bubble bath, right? That's a nice idea. But the real point of radical self-care is this one, which is they'll tell you on the airplane, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. And you might be really tired of hearing this analogy, frankly, when you think about self-care. But here's the part to me that really makes that compelling. They don't tell you this on the airplane. You have 15 seconds to do that. So if you think about it and you think, well, should I put the babies on first, or should I handle the husband first, or should I, or wife or partner, should I call the parent back for, you have to do this first. And it may not be a bubble bath or massage. It may be backing out of something that you previously committed to. It may be renegotiating something, a timeline or a deliverable at work. It may even be rethinking how you're going to approach community solutions to problems. I see a comment in the chat. As a single mom with no family in Ohio, this is how we survived, by helping each other out, right? That community-based solutioning. So I say that about self-care because I want to really make sure that it is not coming across to you as another, like, go out and buy something. It's more about really looking at what you need in order to be able to continue to deliver for all these audiences. And I also, as a professional in a marketing organization, one of the things we talk a lot about in advancement marketing is, where can we dial up or down the fidelity of something as needed? Is there something where we can go, let's put that at a low fidelity and use a template and keep that moving quickly, versus let's go out and custom create something? And I have a great example of this. My kids have reached an age where I can actually engage them now in a discussion about the holidays coming up. Hey guys, what matters to you about the holidays? Because I can go beat my brains out on what we did last year, the same 10 priorities that I feel, between myself and my upbringing and Pinterest and everything, this is what we got to do, right? Or let's just talk about it. And so I asked them, and they said, they really love that we have spaghetti and meatballs every Christmas Eve for dinner. That was like a big thing to them. I thought it was a medium thing, but it's a big thing. So definitely we're doing that, right? The other thing they said was they don't really care about the cookies. They don't want to ice the cookies. Again, they're getting a little bit maybe too grown up for that. I don't know, too cool for icing cookies. That's fine. That's fine. I don't love icing cookies with little kids either. And then the other thing they said, don't worry about the cookies, but we love the advent calendars. And I was like, guys, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and tell you, advent calendars are really expensive. And I said, frankly, I've looked at a few and I've decided I want to put that money into your gift this year because it does a lot of money. And here's what they said back. We're talking like the one at the dollar store or the Five Below where you open the door and there's like a single M&M inside. That's what we're talking about, Mom. We are not talking about the fabric one or the wooden one or the, super duper themed one. Aldi has good advent calendars. Yes, yes. And I said to my kids, I was like, oh. And my daughter said, you're doing this to yourself sometimes. And I was like, thank you. Now, I recommend you don't do what I did, which was I went to Five Below when I was tired and stressed after work, and I went really fast, and I bought three, one for each kid, and I came home with one with Reese's Pieces in it and one with chocolate pieces for Super Mario Kart theme, and I came home with one that had cute little doggies all over it, and I thought my oldest would love that, and it turns out that those are actually dog treats inside. So you got to read the labels, even when you're lowering the expectations. But I think that that's a helpful concept, is to kind of ease off a bit on some of it. Can you low fidelity some things and high fidelity other things and still manage to feed them human food? I mean, come on. They're going to enjoy counting down with the puppy. I'm going to back up because I see a few things have come in. I just don't want to skip over. If I have to back away from a commitment, I tend to completely isolate myself, and that is not healthy at all. And doing more and feeling even more exhausted. Jessica, I hear you. I've done that. I've done that. That's what I was talking about with a mindset shift. So mind shift, as I saw it called recently, that's something that, you internally can tackle about, is that how I need to make myself feel about that? Or can I actually take a nap, or read a book or go for a walk or do nothing and acknowledge the cup filling that happens? I say that like it's easy. It's not easy. I've been there, that same thing myself. Overcome pride and individualism to ask for help. Okay. Thank you for saying that, Tanya. I appreciate that, because here's the thing. This country was founded on the idea that you can do it yourself, and you should. And our heroes did it themselves. And our country was founded by people who literally carved existence out of westward expansion. And I mean, you go watch a cowboy movie and you feel this independent spirit as sort of a national cultural goal. But the reality is, and I see it's been mentioned, is we were meant to exist in community. And even those legends don't necessarily paint an accurate picture of the groups of people it took to to survive and create the society in which we live. And I just want to pause right there and say I'm not skipping over the fact that we achieved some of that in peaceful in violent ways. I'm not skipping that. We did. Um, but I think that also plays into the narrative that it is something that we conquered, not something that we cultivated. And you're going to be a little bit on the sort of, I don't know, maybe I don't want to say unpopular, but when you kind of come back at some of these things and you say, I'm actually going to challenge the notion that I have to do this all myself, or that one family has to do it all themselves, or that everything has to be Pinterest worthy. This is where a little bit of some expectation revisiting kind of it can be hard. And that's why we say self-care is not as easy as a bubble bath, right? You may find that. You also may find some really willing friends and family and community members who are like, thank goodness you said something, because I was thinking the same thing, right? I don't want to do presents for every child in a family when that adds up to 25 children. Could we please do a gift exchange? Like some of these opportunities to really reframe things might help more people. And that is something that honestly gives me comfort when I'm challenging something, is like maybe somebody else is waiting for someone to say something and let it be me, right? I'm gonna back up and read. I'm gonna double check here, and if you have any other questions, let's put this in our chat over here. I'm gonna watch. Doing this to yourself sometimes, yeah, you gotta live out of the mouths of babes, right? Been very frazzled this semester. Lots some legit issues, other concerns. Also signed up for a course. No class in the spring. Chris, good point. I did the same thing. I signed up for it was not a course, but it was a recurring seminar on campus. I'm, I'm over in the Office of Advancement. I'm not working on a degree right now, but I just thought this was so interesting and I signed up for it. And then I think I've missed 2 out of 4. And I finally was like, okay, so what am I hearing? I'm hearing this is not my season to be in this seminar, and that's okay. And my eyes are bigger than my stomach when it comes to signing up for stuff. And I'm talking like, should we go to the community tree lighting tonight? Should we go caroling? Should we make hot chocolate and go to zoo lights? Again, I talk to my people, they don't want to do that stuff. So I picked one that I really want to do, that is really important to me to go to. And I went to that with a girlfriend instead. I did not drag my children. So I think there is some renegotiating that can happen within ourselves, within our families, within our communities. And I'm not saying that that will solve all of this, because what really is missing is systemic support. You are not able to drop off your child at school at 7 a.m. for a free program and pick them up having already been fed dinner at 6:30 p.m. and take them home and throw them in the bathtub. You're not. And if you are doing that, you're probably paying mightily for it. And you're not able to necessarily, have care locations aligned with work locations, aligned with school locations, because you, like I, probably spend a lot of time in the car. These things are systemic around us. These are not things that you can just hack your way out of. But you might be able to start to dial up or down some of the needs on some of those. Oh, Sharon said, thank you for your honesty. We don't need to be all things to all people. You're welcome. Hard learned lessons over here. um, but also I think being our authentic selves and telling you the story about the dog treat advent calendar is just, I mean, it just is. And I think it's something that can maybe help somebody laugh and feel like you're accomplishing a lot. I took a slide out of here. I know we're getting close to time, and if you have questions, throw them in there. But I took a slide out that said, don't be so hard on yourself. The mom in ET had an alien living in her house for 3 days and she didn't even know. So for those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, that's kind of a funny throwback commentary, but it's true. And I think the thing that we owe to ourselves and each other, and underlying all of this, whether you're a mom or a dad or an auntie or an uncle or a dog owner or a child of an aging parent, if you can bring your best self to that situation, to that child challenge, to that parent challenge, to that work challenge, you're bringing your gift, you're bringing your superpower of whatever that is from you, whether it's your humor or whether it's your resiliency. If you're not able to bring the highest version of you for whatever 10,000 reasons that we just talked about, that's okay. but it would be great to be able to bring the highest. And what would it take for you to be able to bring that to some of these situations? And I think that's really all that I'm suggesting we reflect on, especially as we go into this busy season. We're wrapping up the semester, we're handling the holidays, we're prepping for annual, planning or annual kickoffs, whatever. You're doing better than the mom in ET. And so that's something that I encourage. The last thing I will say, again, if you do have a question, you can come off mute and interrupt me, or you can put it in the chat. But the last thing I will say is that if you answered back on the which one is the biggest stress, home care, if you answered that it's home care or balancing unpaid labor at home, those kinds of things. I have had experience. We actually trained a member of our consulting team back in 2023, I believe, on something called the Fair Play Method. And this is a system, it includes a book and a card game that is intended for families to work on together. And it is how to help bring visibility to invisible work at home and then divide invisible work among partners, children, other family members. And it is something that can neutralize some of that challenge and make it accessible to lots of different types of family structures or household structures. And I bring it up because we actually sent one of my consulting colleagues back in, what I say, 2023, 2022, went through a certification to learn how to teach this. But you don't have to know how to teach it. You can just buy the book and the card deck at Amazon.com, and you can go through it with your own household members and see if that helps with anything. I wanted to bring that up at the very end because it is something that is honestly, it comes from an invisible need. And so I didn't want to keep it invisible by not mentioning that because I've heard great things.